Hello, everybody. On my next session of my Books and Looks series of videos where I do my makeup, put together a look while I talk about a book that I have recently read. I've been MIA for a while because I had COVID, so that was not a fun week, but I do still have a lingering cough, so I'll just go ahead and apologize now if I randomly, in the middle of it, I've got still a bit of a tickle going on, but I'm all better and I am ready to get a look going and talk about my latest book. So this book is called Corpse and Crown, written by Alisa Kwitney, I believe is how you say it. And this is actually the second book in a series. I don't know if there's going to be any more in the series, but I know there's the first one and then there's this second one. I actually like the second one better than the first one. The first one, which was called Cadaver and Crown, gave a lot of backstory and character development. But what drew me to these books is that it is basically like fan fiction from Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So I love Frankenstein. It's like my top 10 favorite books of all time. So when I saw that these books were based on those characters and the concepts in the original story, I was intrigued and I wanted to give it a read. So the first one, like I said, has a lot of backstory and setting the scene and presenting the characters and creating all of that. And this one is the second one where it brings us to a bit of a conclusion. So let's go ahead and get started and I'll tell you about it. And hopefully you will like both the look I put together and the book I talk about. So the premise of these stories is very similar to the original Frankenstein, where there is a scientific breakthrough of taking parts of dead bodies or full dead bodies and reanimating them. However, in these books, it is not like a scientist is just trying to do it for scientific research and personal interest. In this book, it is actually funded by the government because they are trying to create soldiers, I guess, so to speak, using, deceased bodies or people who are extremely mangled and, unable to survive or, whatever. And so they take body parts and piece them together, or they take somebody who would make a fantastic soldier, but, they're missing a leg or they lose their eyesight or whatever. So there is a school, a medical school that's training doctors and nurses to, be doctors and nurses, but they also have a department specifically for what they call biomechanicals. And basically what they do is they learn how to, surgically put these, dead body parts all together onto a new body or reanimate a dead body in order to create soldiers. The backstory is that Germany and England are about to go to war, and they're both kind of doing these scientific experiments to create a superhuman biomechanical soldier. And they're in a race to make the best one, the strongest one, as quickly as possible, so that when war breaks out, they'll have, the better soldiers and therefore win the war. So that's the background and the premise. In the first book, it focuses on Victor Frankenstein and Elizabeth Lavenza. Victor Frankenstein is a doctor, and in the very beginning, he ends up getting killed, and they turn him into a biomechanical, but unbeknownst to them, he wasn't entirely dead. So when they turn him into a biomechanical, he retains his identity and his intelligence. He's studying to be a doctor. He's very, very smart, very fancy and a gentleman. So not only is he intelligent, he's very classy and well-mannered and whatnot. So whenever he's made a biomechanical, he's not like all of the others, which for the last however many years have basically been failures because they're just grunts. They can't really understand much. When they're told to do something, they just do it. They can't think for themselves or, put things together and make decisions. So it's not quite working the way they want. And the English government, it takes place in England, the English government is hearing that Germany is really successful and they have really strong and intense and well-functioning biomechanicals. And so everybody's really worried about, this impending war. So in the first one, Victor becomes a biomechanical. he meets and falls in love with Elizabeth, who's the first female doctor at the school. But, he's a biomechanical, so he's considered, less than an animal. He's worthless, whatever. So he has to try to keep it a secret. But by the end of the first book, everybody knows what's going on. They realize, like, oh, wait, he turned out really well. Maybe we should use him as, a way to do better in what we're trying to create here. And it ends relatively on a happy note. Victor is a known biomechanical. He's a success. And so they start changing their plans on how they do it based on his research and experience and whatnot. Oh, and then, of course, just like the original, Victor and Elizabeth end up together at the end of the story. So here we come into the second book, and it changes perspective. Elizabeth and Victor are still in the story, but they are minor characters in this one. And instead, a couple of the minor characters in the first one become the primary characters in this one, and some new characters are added. So the primary characters in the second one include Agatha de Lacy. And if you're familiar with the original Frankenstein, Agatha de Lacy was one of the people who lived in the hut or home that the monster learned to speak and learned social decorum from secretly. In this story, there is no monster unless you count the biomechanicals as the monsters. And Agatha de Lacy is a nursing student at this medical school. And also another character that's brought in is the Artful Dodger and Oliver Twist, which are Dickens characters. So it's kind of neat. We've got a little crossover fan fiction. Gotta love it. So we have Agatha de Lacy. She goes by Aggie. And then we also have Oliver Twist. So Agatha is a nurse, and she really, really cares. She gets herself in trouble sometimes because she kind of goes against protocol, goes over people's heads, like her superiors' heads, in order to help people who need help. She's doing good for the people in her community, but she's getting herself in trouble. And it goes so far that one time one of her friends got herself in trouble and ended up needing medical help. In the middle of the night, her friend goes to get a procedure done, and since she can't afford a real doctor, she goes to a random person to get this procedure done, and it goes very badly. She's in a lot of pain, she's bleeding profusely, and needs a lot of help. So in the middle of the night, Oliver Twist, who happens to be her friend, they meet in the beginning of the story, but they become friends, goes and says, hey, we need help. Can you come help my friend? So she's like, well, I really shouldn't. Like, I have a curfew. I'm a student here, blah, blah, blah. But she goes anyway because, number one, she's building a little crush on Oliver Twist. There's like a little side romance going there, of course. And she can't help herself. If she knows somebody needs help, somebody is sick and needs medical attention, then she can help. She has to. Like, she's drawn to it because that's in her nature. So she goes and she helps this girl and everything's okay. But then she's rushing back, and Oliver Twist is kind of escorting her back to school. They're rushing because she's past curfew. She's worried she's going to get in trouble, kicked out of the program, etc. And on the way there, I misspoke. She and the Artful Dodger are the ones who go to help the person. She and Dodger are the ones who have the little budding romance. Excuse me. Oliver Twist is a bad guy. I'm sorry. So Dodger and Aggie are on their way back in the middle of the night to get her back to her dorm. Her dorm, it's Victorian era. And they get stopped by Oliver Twist, who is basically high on some sort of drug. It's never really specified, but he's out of his mind, and he tries to mug her and take her money because, he wants drugs or whatever. It does not go well because she has her medical bag with her. When he tries to steal her medical bag and steal whatever drugs she might have, he accidentally breaks and splashes her with carbolic acid, and she ends up losing her vision. And Dodger ends up getting really, really hurt as well. So Aggie and Dodger end up going to the hospital. They get to the hospital and they don't think they can help her. Like, your eyes are damaged, Aggie, you're probably gonna lose your vision. So she's like all distraught, and it's awful because like she needs her vision to be a nurse. So she's panicked. And then Dodger, who he recovers, and then he wants to visit her and help her and apologize that, he was taking her home and he didn't protect her and now she's lost her vision. He starts, wandering around the hospital and accidentally goes, well, not accidentally, he actually purposely goes into the director of the hospital's office. The director of the hospital, his name's Moldsdale, Moulds Dale, Moldsdale. He's also the guy who's overseeing the biomechanical process, and he keeps, like, they're literally offering people, if you bring in fresh dead bodies, we'll pay you money because we need fresh dead bodies to do these experiments on and figure out how to make a successful biomechanical. It's, in duty to your country and to your queen. We need your help. So he's like kind of shady, but he's doing it for the good of the country, etc. So Dodger goes into Moldsdale's office and realizes, like, oh my gosh, like, this is very serious. Germany has really good biomechanicals. Ours are terrible. And he accidentally learns, like, all these kind of state secrets. The biggest one being that the Queen of England, Queen Victoria at this time, is a biomechanical. She died like 6 months ago, maybe a year ago. And they when on the verge, pardon me, on the verge of this war with Germany, they're like, we can't have the queen die. We'll definitely be attacked. So the government decides to call Moldsdale and say, like, hey, we have this problem. The queen is on her deathbed. We don't know what to do if she dies, like, our country, blah, blah, blah. So they turn her into a biomechanical, but she's like all the others, not really with it. They can tell her, like, hey, go stand over there, wave at the crowd, sip your tea, whatever. But she's a little bit off. And people are starting to notice, like, when she talks, for example, she doesn't make a lot of sense. And, she's just not quite right. So there's that whole little side plot going on where the queen is actually a biomechanical, and they're trying to keep it a secret, and they're trying to maintain her, keep the secret and maintain her health as best as possible. It's very chaotic, very dramatic. And Dodger learns all of this when he sneaks into Moldsdale's office. And then Moldsdale, of course, finds him in his office. And Dodger's already not in great shape from the mugging. And Moldsdale basically kills him, uses it as an excuse, like, oh, well, you're just some, like, petty thief or whatever. We're going to go ahead and use you as in our experiment for biomechanicals. So kills him. And they have a new method that they want to try, and they're like, this is perfect. We have this, new dead body, and he's just an unknown, like, whatever, petty thief. Who cares? Let's use him. So what they end up doing is they take Dodger's eyes and they give them to Aggie, because remember, Aggie had the acid in her eyes and she went blind. So they based a whole eye transplant. Okay, like, not just a cornea transplant, a whole eyeball transplant. A little science fiction-y, yes. So Aggie ends up being able to see, and Dodger gets mechanical eyes that can, like, zoom in and zoom out and can see, like, with extreme detail, even really far away, kind of like a living sniper scope. And so Dodger ends up having this super skill whenever he wakes up, and because he also wasn't completely 100% dead like Victor, he still retains his identity and his knowledge and his memories and all of that. He's still like he's still Dodger. While all of the other biomechanicals who are dead, they're just like mindless grunts. Dodger, like Victor, weren't entirely dead, so they maintain their identity, they maintain their personality, etc. So another little interesting detail that happens in this sci-fi story, whenever a body part is taken from one body and put on another body, pieces of that dead person's personality, memories, etc., get infused into the new person. So, like, Victor Frankenstein got a new arm and, like, a new piece of skin here and like another body part from a cadaver, a dead person. And so in the first book, every now and then this other personality would pop out and it would be super complicated and confusing until they figured out that that's what happens. So Dodger, even though he got mechanical eyes, he didn't get eyes from a cadaver, but he's still like things are off for him. It takes him a really long time to like remember who he is and what he can do and figure out how to make it work. While Aggie, who got Dodger's eyes, now has some memories of Dodger. And because there's like a connection between the two of them, this very strange thing happens with those two, Aggie and Dodger, that they can like see in each other's minds. They can do it intentionally, and it also happens accidentally when they're physically close to one another. They can kind of like see through each other's eyes. So that ends up being very handy later in the story. So at this point in the story, we're about 3/4 of the way through the book. And, Aggie and Dodger have figured out that, they can sort of communicate through this, shared body part telepathy, for lack of a better description. And what also is interesting is they can see how they view each other. So it's also a part of the romance. This is how they realize, like, oh my gosh, we really do like each other. This isn't just silly crushes. We really do have feelings for each other. So their romance blossoms. So now we get to the climax of the story where, the biomechanicals like Aggie, Victor, Elizabeth, Dodger, they have learned officially, they've been like told by the government, they're like in on the secret that the queen is a biomechanical, and they're actually helping take care of her, helping her with her health and whatnot. And they figure out through what happens with Dodger and Aggie and with Victor, how to help her not be so like gruntish and clueless. So they are actually able to kind of pull her out. You know what it is? Elizabeth invents this thing. Can't remember what it's called, but she invents some sort of machine mechanism that basically helps pull your personality back out whenever you die and become a biomechanical. So they do that to the queen, and they kind of like bring her personality back, which is handy because they do that, figure that out and do that just in time, because the whatever it's called, the guy in charge of Germany, the Kaiser in Germany, who's pretty evil at this time, very violent, very mean, he decides to just show up in England. He did inform them first. He's like, I'm going to come and I'm going to bring my biomechanical and I want to battle to see whose is better. I'm coming, in this month or whatever. So they're, trying to figure it out as quickly as possible. Like, oh, we got to get our biomechanicals to work. And then they have the whole Dodger thing, and they have the whole Victor thing, and they have the whole Queen thing. And they pull it together in just the last second. The Kaiser shows up with his biomechanical, which is this huge creature that's like super strong and has like metal plates infused onto his skin. So he's really difficult to fight and defeat. And poor Dodger, all he has is, special eyeballs, has to fight this guy. But unbeknownst to him, he didn't realize it until he got into the fight. He also has super quick reflexes. He can move really, really quickly. He can jump really high. He can do like acrobatics, which is really handy in a fight. So, they start this fight and he's actually quite successful. Yes, he takes a couple of hits, but surprise, surprise, it doesn't hurt that bad. He's also got this extra strength-ish thing and like not heals quickly, but kind of gets over the pain and shock of it pretty quickly. So this battle is ensuing. Here we are at the climax. This battle is ensuing. Dodger is fighting the German biomechanical. We have the queen who's just coming out of this weird grunt phrase of mine where she's like just figuring out like who she is and where she came from and what's going on. And the Kaiser's there and Molesdale is there, and they're trying to like talk about like mine's better than yours, and no, mine's better than yours, and basically starting a war because they're men and want to pretend like whatever they do is the best. Sorry, no offense to any of the men out there, but you know how it goes. So this battle is ensuing, and during this battle, Aggie and Dodger like switch personalities a couple of times so that Dodger can like do things through Aggie's body, and like help the fight along. So it's kind of a bit cheating, but I'd say no, because it's a biomechanical skill. And then the queen comes out just in time and is like, what is happening here? That's enough of all this. And the fight ends, and basically Germany and England come to the conclusion of, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do these fights. You know, we both have these different scientific experiments or scientific advancements. You have these cool things. We have these cool things. Maybe we should make a treaty and work together. What crazy idea. So that's basically how that part ends. Germany and England start working together. They share their insights and their scientific advancements with biomechanicals, and then they kind of start working together to make the world a better place. In the meantime, we have Aggie and Dodger, who are sort of, I guess, well, he's definitely biomechanical. She's just got his implants and has this unique ability. And then, of course, you have Victor and Elizabeth, where Victor is straight up a biomechanical, and Elizabeth is a scientist who's basically helping the progress and helping make it work. There we go. Helping make it work, and her invention helps make the grunts not so clueless, like their personalities come back. So progress, moving forward, science, yay. And there was also a weird little side story, which, I mean, it ended up being an important part of the overall plot, but if it wasn't there, I don't think it would have made that much of a difference. So Moldsdale had a daughter who I guess had polio or something, because she was living in an iron lung and couldn't go anywhere, couldn't stand up, et cetera, et cetera. And in the first book, Moldsdale tried to kill Elizabeth and put his daughter's consciousness into Elizabeth's body so his daughter, Janine, could be alive and well. Also, by the way, Janine is a character from the original Frankenstein, which is kind of nice. Justine dies in the original Frankenstein. She's murdered by the monster, but she's alive and well in this book. So Justine, whenever they tried to do that in the first book, moved Justine into Elizabeth's body. Obviously, it didn't work because Elizabeth is in the second book. But instead, it didn't work, but Justine gains the ability to mind read. At first, it was just Elizabeth because of the mind meld thing they did, but then she slowly starts to be able to read other people's thoughts. And towards the end of the story, another person, just random side character, gets sick and dies, and very, very close to death, very, very close to death. And they ask Janine to do her psychic thing and kind of go into her mind and try to convince her to, hold on, stay strong. If you can just survive a little bit longer, then we might be able to have medical for you or whatever. But it doesn't work. While Justine is mind melded into this girl, Nancy dies and Janine can't leave. So it actually worked out in Janine's favor, because she ends up basically being permanently in Nancy's body. So at the end of the story, we have, Justine is now in a new, fresh, young, healthy body. The boy who was in love with Nancy, he and Justine hit it off. And so it ends with all these little love stories coming together. We have Victor and Elizabeth happily ever after. She's, helping him survive as a biomechanical, and they're, doing science together and being doctors together, and it's amazing. And then, you have obviously Aggie and Dodger end up together. It's a happy ending. Everybody finds their love, and they come to terms with their various medical issues and new fancy skills. The war is thwarted, and everybody lives happily ever after. It's quite lovely. Lovely little ending. So that's pretty much how the book ends. Happy ending. It was real close there. We almost had a war, but it worked out really well. I liked it. I thought it was, I was expecting a little bit of a closer, for both of the books, I was expecting a closer fan fiction of the original Frankenstein, but obviously it's not. It's just taking the concept of, creating life from the dead and then the existing characters from the original book and just a whole new story, which is fine. I really liked it. That said, I think the first book I would probably give like a 6 out of 10 because it was kind of slow in my opinion with a little too much backstory, a little too much providing character development that, while necessary and helpful, it was just too much. There were a couple of times where I put it down and it took me a little while to pick it back up again because I wasn't as invested, but I did, like, once I got through maybe the first half, then I really loved it. I liked the story and I liked the concept. It did end kind of abruptly and with a bit of a cliffhanger. It was like Elizabeth and Victor got on a boat and left. I was like, well, where'd they go? And then we came back into the second book and they're there. And then it finds out that they just went on like a little trip together. They're not even married or anything. I thought maybe they ran off to get married, but they didn't. They just went on like a little escapade together or something. So the second one, this one, Corpse and Crown, I think I'd give this one an 8 out of 10. Maybe even like an 8.9, or excuse me, 8.5 out of 10, because I really did like the story. I liked the balance of character development and plot development. I feel like this one went a lot better for that. I also really liked these characters better than Victor and Elizabeth. They were fine characters, but since I'm so in love with the original Frankenstein, I was just like they're a little bit too much changed. But these guys, first of all, I'm not super knowledgeable about the Artful Dodger or Oliver Twist. And Agatha de Lacy had a pretty small part in the original book. So I felt like the artistic liberties that were taken with her character were a little bit easier to swallow, I really liked her character. I liked that she was a nurse. I liked that she was realistic, and I liked that she was very helpful with her friends. I really liked her. And I also really liked that it had a happy ending, which was nice. It had a nice bow at the end where like the war was ended and everybody found a love interest and it was like, yay, everybody's happy. So I give it probably, we'll say an 8.5 out of 10. I do recommend it. You can read this one without reading the first one. However, you might be a little bit confused about, there's some references, like there was a fire in the first book that this one talks about that you would probably be confused what they were talking about. Talking about like the secondary personality that Victor got from his arm transplant. You might be a little confused about that. But you can still enjoy this as a standalone plot, a standalone story, without reading the first one. But still, you might as well read both. I mean, let's read both, right? So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Liked it. I hope you like it. I did a pretty basic look today. This would be like my everyday look where I don't have like super bold eyes, more neutral lip. So I hope you like my look and I hope you liked the book and I hope to see you again soon. I will make another video soon. And yeah. Oh, in the comments down below, tell me if you think you might want to read either of these books by Alisa Kwitney. If you are a fan of Frankenstein, I'd love to hear about it. And if you like my look, or if you have any suggestions of what book you would like me to read and talk about, or if you have any particular makeup looks that you would like me to do for the video, make a comment down below and let me know. And I will try to get that done for you. Thanks. Have a fantastic day and stay beautiful inside and out. Bye.